She said the late-night sessions were about healing and boundaries. The receipt I found from a boutique hotel 2 blocks from his condo said something else entirely. The night I waited in my car and watched them walk in together, the word counseling broke like a cheap hinge. Names Daniel Hart, 31, Portland, Maine. Workdays smell like brine and ethanol because I split my time between seawater tanks and the small chemistry lab at the Gulf of Maine Research Institute. We track pH, salinity, species health, the slow generosity of kelp. I can tell you exactly how much dissolved oxygen a juvenile cod wants at dawn in February. After hours, I sit at my kitchen table with a loop in my eye and bring old mechanical watches back to rhythm. It's the same satisfaction in different clothes. Identify friction, clean it out, oil sparingly, set the beat. Trust metal, it doesn't lie. My wife former was Emily Hart, 29, a high school art teacher at Casco Bay High. Weekends, she'd take her students to sketch tugboats, gulls, and winter people in wool hats walking their dogs. We met at the Old Port Festival in 2018 under a canopy where an old woman sold sea glass glued into tiny worlds. Emily bought one, then looked at my wrist and said, "That thing ticks like it's hiding secrets." It was a Soviet Vostok amphibia, scratched crystal, stubborn crown. She liked objects with history and men who could fix things. I liked artists who could label the wind. We'd started attending Harbour Light Church in Deering Center during the pandemic, a small congregation with a big Instagram run by the new pastor, Caleb Morrison, 38, who moved like a TED Talk and smiled like he had a lighting team. He preached about integrated lives, faith, finance, fitness, with a wireless mic clipped just so. He knew his camera angles, his hashtags, his lesser prophets. He remembered names. On day 1, he said, "Dan, marine biology. Man, we need more people who can read creation." You could tell he had been good at something other than church. He wore sneakers that cost rent. At first, he was good for Emily. He validated her teaching, her patience, her art. He asked her to help with a community mural behind the sanctuary, then to lead a small group for young creatives, then to help plan Harbour Light's fall renewal weekend. He invited us over for game night. His condo on Congress Street felt like an Airbnb staged for a photo shoot. Ficus in a mat planter, floating shelves with curated books, pour-over coffee gear, framed black and white of a mountain he'd never climbed. He lived simply, he said, but the espresso machine was $1,800, and the couch swallowed you like a marketing campaign. Red flags came dressed as compliments. He told Emily she had pastoral instincts, which meant she stayed late to hear teenagers talk about their parents until her tea went cold. He said I had engineer energy, steady, quiet, useful. He touched Emily lightly on the elbow when he passed, always in front of someone. He texted at 10 p.m. to ask her advice about artistic souls, then 10:12, then 10:19, trusting that if you write a person's name enough, they'll believe they're being seen. Money wrapped itself into it the way salt wraps the air. Harbour Light pushed a campaign in April, raise the roof, literally. The sanctuary needed a new roof Maine winters don't play, and new LED wall panels, and, oddly, a pastoral care suite. Caleb made an itemized slide. Roof $68,000, LED wall $34,500, pastoral care suite $12,200. He said transparency builds trust. He said Starbucks is the enemy. He said $1 given to the church is $1 redeemed from the world. He's the kind of man who can make budgets sound like baptisms. We gave $1,500. It felt grown up, responsible. We are not rich, but I make mid-60s. Emily makes mid-40s. No kids yet. A second-hand RAV4 and a Subaru with the check engine light that comes and goes like a mood. We set up a monthly draft and felt righteous. Then, in May, Emily came home with language that didn't sound like hers. She said Caleb thought she had gifts for prayer counseling and wanted to invest in mentoring her one-on-one. She said he'd asked her to schedule deep work sessions on Wednesday nights after youth group, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m., because the day must get quiet so we can hear. She said partners were welcome to sit in on the first one if it made them feel safe, which I wanted to hear as normal, but the phrasing was too slick, like a door with new hinges on a broken frame. The first Wednesday I came, Caleb greeted me like an usher with 64 teeth. He had the small room off the sanctuary staged with 2 armchairs at an angle, a low table, a tissue box placed for camera-perfect reach. He prayed like an audition and used words that made silence busy. Lord, we just invite your presence to, recenter our tired, anxious hearts. He asked Emily to talk about her father, which seemed less like prayer and more like therapy. He told her to reparent herself and asked what she would tell little Em. I watched Emily cry and felt protective and skeptical at once. After an hour, Caleb turned to me. "Dan, why don't we give Emily 15 minutes to journal on this, just between her and the Lord?" he said, and smiled like good men smile when they want another man to feel looked after. I went to the foyer and pretended to read a pamphlet about the Honduras mission while listening for anything unholy through a door. Everything sounded soft. I didn't go the next week. Caleb seemed relieved. He told Emily she needed a container with less observation. He used words that belong in labs, not living rooms. She started coming home at midnight with puffy eyes and a glow like sunburn. She said they talked about attachment injuries. She said they sometimes took a walk to process. I asked where. She said around. A week later, she said Caleb thought she might have a call to women's ministry and needed focused formation. He wanted to meet at his condo because church is too busy. I said no. She said, "Do you trust me?" I said yes because I did. Because trust isn't blanket permission, but I wanted to believe it was scaffolding, and I didn't want to be the man who made his wife choose between God and a calendar. June 9th, cleaning out our hall table, I found a folded receipt from the Francis Apartments Hospitality Portland's little boutique hotel on Avon Street, 2 blocks from Caleb's building. It was for 2 cappuccinos, a charcuterie plate, and a day-use pass for their quiet library rental, $179. The name on the receipt, Harbor Light Pastoral Care. The card, ending in 7724. Emily doesn't have a card ending in that. We do, however, donate to the church, and the thought of my tithe paying for a charcuterie plate between my wife and my pastor laid something cold in my chest. I put the receipt on my desk under the loupe and looked at the ink like I could scald it. I asked Emily. She said Caleb sometimes used the hotel library because it felt safe for hard conversations, and the church had a partnership. She said nothing happened. She said I was being controlling. The next Wednesday, I didn't say anything when she put on a loose sweater and tied her hair into the kind of knot that says, "I don't care, but is careful." I just watched the Find My app on her phone. Yes, we share locations because if you fall on black ice in January, you want someone to know where and when. The dot paused at 95 High Street, Francis Apartments. I took my RAV4, parked on Avon where I could see the hotel door, and waited. At 9:41 p.m., Emily walked in. At 9:44, Caleb arrived in a slate hoodie and a beanie like he was hiding in plain sight. They hugged the way people hug when the hug is a promise, then went inside together. I didn't go in. I let the hot jealousy press into something cooler. I took out my phone, opened notes, and wrote, June 14th, 9:41, p.m. 11:57, p.m. Emily plus Caleb at Francis. Expenses exist. Check Harbor Light card 7724. Then I went home, sat at my table, and took apart a 1960s Omega Seamaster because metal is honest. The breaking point came public, like humiliation always does when someone thinks they're untouchable. End of June, Harbor Light held its summer praise night on the Back Cove Trail. A circle of guitars, portable speakers, children with glow sticks. After the final song, Caleb took the mic without the mic. He thanked volunteers, thanked donors, thanked our incredible Emily Hart for pouring herself into women's ministry, then said lightly, "And thanks to Dan for letting us borrow her some extra late nights. The harvest is plentiful, brother." People laughed. He clapped me on the back with a pressure that made me want to turn and break a knuckle. He winked at Emily like a stagehand prepping a set. The people clapped. The gulls thieved chips. The word borrow felt like a trespass. I left early. At home, I printed our bank statements for the last 4 months, highlighted our Harbor Light drafts in green, then opened the church's public 990 from the prior year. Caleb had posted it online like a flex and circled pastoral care suite allocation in the notes. I emailed the Francis Apartments asking for any public partnership rates with Harbor Light Church and got a polite reply, $179 for day-use library room, $299 for overnight when booked as pastoral rate. Beverages and food billed separately. I wrote it down. On July 1st at 8:10 a.m., I sent a single email to Harbor Light's board 5 members, names on the website, including a retiree named Agnes Monroe who reads budgets like Psalms. Subject, concern use of pastoral care funds. I included 3 attachments, a scan of the Francis receipt, a list of 7 pastoral care charges on the church's public debit account, numbers redacted except last 4 7724, pulled from the fragmentary report they'd posted for transparency, and a timeline of Emily's counseling with Caleb. Dates, times, places. I did not allege an affair. I wrote, I am concerned that church funds are being used for private meetings that are neither accountable nor appropriate, and that involve my spouse. I asked for a copy of the church's counseling policy. I sent it. I closed my laptop. I went to work and measured ammonia in a tank of scallops. At 12:22 p.m., I got a text from Caleb. "Brother, this is a misunderstanding. Can we meet man to man? Love you." That phrasing brother as possession, love as lever made my jaw ache. I didn't reply. At 3:43 p.m., an email from the board chair. "We take this seriously. We'll review our policies and respond." At 7:10 p.m., Emily came home with eyes like wet glass. "Why did you email the board?" she said. "You humiliated me." "I protected us," I said. "I used receipts and dates." "You don't understand how spiritual direction works," she said. "He is helping me." "You are strangling me." The aftermath started the way a tide starts. You don't notice it moving until your feet are wet. Within days, my inbox filled with messages from church people, some concerned, some weaponized sweet. "We're praying for unity. We know the enemy divides. Caleb would never." Someone slid into my DMs with a Bible verse about not touching the Lord's anointed. Which would be hilarious if it weren't the kind of phrase used to hide bruises. Emily slept on the couch 2 nights by choice. On the third, she slept at her friend Leah's apartment, or she said she did. The Find My Dot spent 3 hours at Francis again, then hopped to a condo on Congress. I already knew that address. I did not throw plates. I did not call Leah. I did the boring things that win in daylight. On July 6th, I met with a lawyer at a firm on Pearl Street, Cynthia Paquette, 42, who had shoulders like a rower and eyes that didn't blink at betrayal. I gave her the timeline. I asked about separation in Maine, marital property, my house, the small 2-bedroom on Woodfords I had bought before marriage, deed in my name. She drew 3 boxes. House, premarital, but any equity gained during marriage could be negotiable. Accounts, joint and separate. Conduct, not determinative, but judges are human. She told me not to move out. She told me not to badmouth publicly. She told me to keep documenting. "You are a scientist," she said. "Be your own witness." On July 8th, I went to my credit union and moved half of our joint checking $4,612, $83 into a new account solely in my name to protect it from sudden ministry expenses. I left the other half. I changed online banking passwords. I installed a second deadbolt. I exported our phone bill and highlighted the spike in calls to Caleb's number after 10 p.m. I printed everything and put it in a navy binder labeled Heart Q3. At 11:20 p.m. that night, Caleb stood on my porch and rang the bell like he owned it. He wore the beanie again, like a disguise. I watched him through the peephole stand with his hands in his pockets, like a teenager who'd been caught sneaking out. I didn't open. He called through the door, calm, performative. He said he wanted to apologize if anything he'd done caused a spirit of fear. He said he wanted to release Emily to her marriage. He said words like covering and accountability and brotherhood. He said he would post a statement about a boundary misstep if I would keep this in the family. I hit record on my phone and let him talk. After 2 minutes, I said through the door, "Leave my porch." He did, with a sigh I heard as clearly as if it were in my kitchen. I saved the audio and emailed it to Cynthia with subject, "Pastor Porch Talk." Escalation came like tide meets storm. Anonymous Instagram accounts started following me empty profiles with Bible verses. Emily posted a photo of a journal and a candle with a caption about learning to choose softness. Caleb posted a carousel about boundaries with a slide that said, "False accusations are a form of abuse." Agnes from the board emailed asking to meet with me and Emily together. Emily refused, said it felt like a trial. The board met without us. Caleb preached that Sunday on Joseph and Potiphar's wife and did not blink at the irony. Then he made his move. Harbour Light sent a letter to my employer's generic inbox infog MRI, alleging that I had harassed a community leader and spread defamatory claims that threaten our partnership with the Institute's Coastal Cleanup Initiative. The letter was signed by the board chair, but it read like Caleb's voice-high, brave, victim-forward. HR forwarded it to my manager with an FYI, "Do you know anything about this?" I sat in a windowless room with HR and my director, Lisa, and explained that my community leader was the pastor sleeping with my wife, and the funds in question were not ocean-related. Lisa is a woman who has spent 20 years in rooms with men who want to turn plankton into propaganda. She said, "We'll handle it." HR said, "We will not engage." I emailed Cynthia. She emailed Harbour Light a letter that could strip varnish. Any further contact with my client's employer will be considered tortious interference. The board finally did something resembling spines. Agnes called me and Emily for a meeting at the church office on July 19th, 6 p.m. No, Caleb, she promised. We went. Emily sat small in a chair, hair unbrushed, the look of someone whose will has been pressed between heavy books. Agnes, 67, wore a navy cardigan and a frown you don't manufacture. She placed 2 documents on the table. We reviewed our counselling policies. We don't have any, she said bluntly. We reviewed pastoral spending. We found multiple charges that do not align with the intent our donors had when they gave. She looked at Emily, then at me. We are putting Pastor Morrison on administrative leave while an outside firm investigates. Emily's relief and panic collided on her face. She said, he was helping me. Agnes said he was helping himself. Agnes turned to me. You did the right thing. That doesn't mean it won't hurt. It hurt. It wasn't Netflix-level dramatic. It was me making dinner for one and measuring garlic wrong because I never measure. It was me taking apart a Hamilton khaki Field from 1994 and crying into the tiny parts tray because tears clean nothing. It was Emily moving into Leah's guest room and texting me paragraphs that began reasonable and ended wrong. You went nuclear. You could have come to me. You broke my trust. It was me writing back once, you broke our marriage in a boutique hotel, and then not writing again. The positive turn arrived at 5:30 a.m. 2 weeks later, when my neighbor, an Italian bakery owner named Marco, 36, who runs 3 miles before he opens his ovens, knocked on my door while I stood in a t-shirt hunting for socks. He held out a bag that smelled like mornings surviving. You look like someone who has not eaten a decent thing, he said. I have a sister, I can tell. Inside, 2 sfogliatelle and a paper cup of coffee that understood me. Marco knows watches. He used to help his nonno fix the clock in their village church, and he asked if I could look at an old Longines pocket watch that doesn't want to live. I said bring it by. He brought himself by instead, and a watch, and a playlist of old Italian songs my grandmother would approve of. He didn't ask about Emily until I told him. When I said pastor, he swore softly and crossed himself without thinking. The ones that say they are holy always scare me, he said. He taught me to fold dough with the heel of my hand. I taught him to listen for the moment a balanced spring wants to be balanced. We didn't become a romance and solve anything. We became 2 men in a kitchen making things move again. In August, Harbour Light announced that Caleb had resigned to pursue a season of rest. They used phrases like mutual parting and prayerful transition. They refunded donors who asked. They called me. Agnes said quietly, we want you and Emily to know we failed to protect your marriage. I said, we failed it too. She said, yes, but power has its own sins. She asked if we'd stay at Harbour Light. I said no. She said she didn't blame me. She sent a handwritten card that said, truth keeps its receipts. Cynthia filed paperwork for a legal separation on August 15th. We divided things like anyone divides things. The blue Dutch oven to Emily, the camping stove to me, art prints we unframed and reframed with different lives, a couch neither of us wanted anymore because it knew too much. I kept the house. We closed the joint account. We returned the church draft. We sold the Subaru to a Bodo in sophomore who said he didn't mind the light. Emily kept the cat, Oliver, because he preferred her and everyone should get one being who chooses them. The last escalation came quiet and ugly. A week after the resignation, someone slid a note under my door that said, God saw, God will judge. It was in block letters with the drama of a high school ransom. I put it in the binder under Miscellaneous Anonymous. I installed a camera. I told Victor. He said, I will find them, like a Slavic avenger. The camera caught nothing but raccoons and the mailman's beautiful calves. September cooled the air enough to make me think. On a Saturday, I drove down to Fort Williams in Cape Elizabeth, sat near the lighthouse like every other person with a wound, and took out an early 70s Seiko 5 whose day disc had frozen on sun. I cleaned it, oiled it, set it ticking. The day disc flipped to Mon with a soft confidence. Nearby, a woman laughed and the sound hit me in the ribs like a memory of a joke I used to tell. I wanted to hate Emily. I couldn't. I could love the version of her that sold sea glass to herself and also tell the truth that she had lost herself in a man with a mic. I saw Caleb once more, in line at Tandem Coffee on Congress. He wore a baseball cap low, unshaven, a man who looks like he's doing penance by aesthetic. He saw me and offered a smile like a hand he knew I wouldn't take. He said, brother, because he couldn't help himself. I said, Caleb. He said, I've been in counseling. I said, you should stay. He said, I hope you can forgive. I said, forgiveness and access are different currencies. He looked like he'd write that down and post it under my name if he thought he could. He said, Emily and I were never, and I didn't let him finish because the sentence didn't deserve it. Your receipts say otherwise, I said. So does the hotel. He swallowed and forced his shoulders into a humble shape. He took his latte to go. Emily texted me a month later to say she had left Harbour Light, that she was teaching art again, that she was seeing a therapist with an office full of poor lighting and tissues that did not come with fonts. She said she didn't think she believed in pastors anymore. I sent her a photo of Oliver asleep in a sun square on my rug that she must have also had on her phone. She sent back a crying emoji and then words I believed because they were small. I'm sorry. I do not own an ending that makes the arc neat. I own a kitchen where flour lives in a jar, a bench vise that waits for metal that wants to be honest, and a neighbour who knocks early with pastries and late with gossip. I own a navy binder labelled Heart Q3, and I intend not to need a Q4. I own the knowledge that numbers pointed north when words tried to make south feel holy. I own the rhythm of a balance wheel returning to beat. The hook was a lie in ink and a door I didn't open. The twist is small and sufficient. One night under the loop, I realized the Seiko's day disc wasn't misprinted sun after all. It was worn. Someone had let it sit a long time in one position and expected it to change out of habit. It needed a nudge. It needed the right tension. It needed someone to quit pretending and adjust the lever. Caleb once told me, with sincerity and teeth, that I would be forgotten because I didn't create moments. He said moments are what keep lives interesting. He said men like me fade. She said the counseling would make us better. He said God would fix what men broke. They said they'd forget me in the rush of their own story. But I'm the one who forgot them.